New manager overlooked my patent. Now their star therapy is failing patients, and everyone's panicking. Have you ever worked so hard on something, poured your heart, your time, your soul into it, only to have someone come in, take over, and act like it never even existed? Like your work, your ideas just didn't matter? It's a strange kind of hurt. Not the loud kind, but the quiet, heavy kind that sits in your chest and makes you question whether you should have even tried in the first place. I wasn't always the type to speak up. I liked building things in silence. I liked research, experiments, tweaking prototypes at midnight while everyone else was asleep. That's how my patent came to life. A simple, elegant modification to an existing therapy method that made it more effective, more adaptive, and most importantly, safer. I wasn't trying to change the world overnight. I just wanted to solve one little problem I kept seeing with patients. And when I finally did, it was like catching lightning in a bottle. It worked. Not just in trials, in real life with real people. I saw patients recover faster. I saw fewer side effects. It was quiet success, but it was there, documented, tested, and yes, filed. I had the patent in my name. It wasn't flashy, it didn't make headlines, but it mattered, at least to me. Then the new manager arrived. Fresh out of a big-name consultancy, full of buzzwords and confidence. She was the kind of person who walked into a room and immediately decided what was useful and what was outdated. You know the type. I remember the first team meeting she led. She came in with charts and a big plan, how we were going to reimagine our core services and pivot to a data-forward therapeutic model. I had to stop myself from rolling my eyes. Not because I didn't believe in progress, but because I knew how these things usually went. Big talk, shiny presentations, and underneath it all, shortcuts. At first, I tried to stay open-minded. I thought, maybe this could be good. Maybe she'd bring fresh energy. But then, things started shifting. Meetings got shorter. Questions got deflected. My work, my methods, started disappearing from conversations. I tried bringing up the patent, the therapy I'd spent years refining. I even pulled her aside once and offered to show her the data, patient outcomes, everything. She smiled, nodded, and said, "That's great stuff, really. But we're moving in a new direction." And just like that, I became invisible. They rolled out the new version of the therapy 6 months later. It looked familiar, but stripped down. Sleeker, but with corners cut. My method was nowhere in the documentation. No credit, no acknowledgement. And worse, it ignored the exact improvement I'd worked on. I knew the risks. I'd seen what happened without that safeguard in place. At first, no one noticed. Everything looked fine. But then the reports started trickling in. One patient developed complications. Then another. They brushed it off. Standard variants, they said. Unrelated. But it wasn't unrelated. I recognized the signs, the same patterns I had worked to eliminate. I remember sitting in my car one night after getting one of the reports forwarded to me by a colleague who still believed in what I'd done. My hands were shaking. Not from anger. Well, not just from anger. From heartbreak. Those patients were real people. Not numbers. Not slides in a pitch deck. And they were suffering because someone chose ego over safety. Efficiency over experience. But what could I do? My name was on a patent no one acknowledged. I didn't have the fancy title. I didn't have the budget or the team or the boardroom influence. For weeks, I kept wondering, do I fight this or do I walk away? Then the panic started. A high-profile client, a well-known hospital group, put the therapy on hold after one of their patients had a severe reaction. Internal reviews were launched. The therapy's effectiveness, safety, and origins came under the microscope. That's when people started calling me again. At first, just whispers. Didn't you have a version of this a while back? Didn't you raise concerns? And then louder. Can we see your documentation? Can we review your model? Suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. But here's the thing. I wasn't jumping up to say, "I told you so." That wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to protect the people we served. I wanted to help fix what was broken. But the damage had already started, and now it was a scramble. Leadership was trying to cover tracks. The new manager was in damage control mode. Meetings were held behind closed doors. PR statements were drafted. And I sat quietly at my desk, waiting, because I knew what was coming. The problem with ignoring the people who build things is that eventually the cracks start to show. You can rebrand all you want. You can spin numbers, redesign logos, even rename the therapy. But the science doesn't care about optics. Patients don't care about buzzwords. And when something fails, when lives are affected, you can't hide behind a slideshow. The head of clinical operations came to me one morning, eyes tired, voice quiet. "We need to talk about your patent," he said. And just like that, the door that had been shut was cracked open again. Not because they suddenly respected me, but because they didn't have a choice anymore. I wanted to be bitter. Honestly, I did. After all the meetings I was excluded from, the sideways looks, the silence. But the truth is, it wasn't about me anymore. It was about what came next. What I did with this strange, messy moment. And that's when I made a decision that surprised even myself. I remember sitting across from him, heart pounding but face calm. He laid the folder on the table, my patent documents, clinical reports, patient testimonials. It felt surreal, like seeing proof of a life you'd almost forgotten you'd lived. "We need you to explain everything," he said, "from the ground up." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an invitation to a promotion. It was closer to a summons. The only person who truly understood this therapy was me. And now, they needed me. I took a deep breath and began. I talked about late nights in the lab, the first time I saw that one patient's progress report light up my screen and realized, this is it. I explained the small tweak in the dosing algorithm, the extra safety checks in the delivery device. I walked them through the side effect reduction in trial groups, how we'd gone from a 12% complication rate down to under 3. I didn't spare any detail. Sometimes my scientist brain goes a little overboard, but this time, I needed them to see the full picture. By the end of the hour, the clinical operations head was leaning back, rubbing his forehead. "We cut corners," he said quietly. "We were so eager to roll out a new product that we ignored the one person who knew how to make it work." I nodded, but I didn't say, "I told you so." It didn't matter. Guilt was a hollow consolation for anyone who'd been harmed. Word started to spread internally. I got emails from colleagues I hadn't heard from in months. Some were sheepish. "Can we talk?" Others were more urgent. "HR wants a statement." Within days, leadership convened a task force to redesign the therapy, this time under my guidance. I was given a small team, mostly the people who'd stuck with me, who'd believed my data all along. We worked around the clock, re-implementing the patent's safeguards, rerunning key tests, patching the new system back together like emergency surgery. And outside, the industry was watching. A few trade journals caught wind of the hiccup, enough to generate a flurry of articles about Therapy X's rocky rollout, and corporate shortcuts put patient lives at risk. Headlines don't mention the quiet victories, the nurses who smiled when they saw the new protocol, knowing fewer nights on call, the families who breathed easier when their loved ones got home sooner. But those small miracles matter too. Midway through that sprint, I found myself in a call with a doctor at one of the hospitals that had paused our therapy. He'd been candid, frank even, about how frustrated he'd been with the initial rollout. But when I walked him through our revised method, he sounded almost relieved. "You've given us back confidence," he said. "We were scared to use this again. Now, I think our patients will actually benefit." It hit me then. My fight wasn't just professional. It was deeply personal. Every line of code, every calibration, every patient note, it all mattered. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. The new manager, the one who'd brushed me aside, watched from the sidelines. I heard she was scrambling to protect her image, requesting meetings with PR, drafting statements about strategic pivots and innovation roadmaps. But the narrative had shifted. People weren't buying buzzwords anymore. They wanted facts. They wanted results. One afternoon, our CEO popped by the lab. I wasn't expecting her. She stood at the entrance, arms crossed, watching me adjust the final settings on the device we were about to ship for the redesigned pilot trial. "You've done good work," she said after a moment. "Not good for the company, just good work." It felt like the highest praise I could earn. We launched the restarted trial 2 weeks later. Every package went out under my watch. There were real-time dashboards, alert systems, extra training sessions for clinicians. We weren't racing the calendar anymore, only racing to make sure each patient got the safest, most effective treatment possible. And slowly, the data came back positive again. Complication rates plummeted, recovery times shrank, hospital administrators started placing new orders. I won't lie, it was vindicating. There's a thrill in seeing your name back in the reports, in watching a therapy you built perform exactly as you envisioned. But the real reward was knowing that patients were getting the help they needed, that families were regaining hope. Everything else, titles, headcounts, press releases, felt secondary. Yet I knew this chapter wasn't over. Corporate politics never truly vanish. There would be budget meetings, new leadership changes, fresh initiatives vying for attention. I had to stay vigilant, protect the integrity of the work, keep the team focused on the mission, and remind everyone that what we built existed for a reason, to serve people, not slide decks. So I did what any scientist would do. I documented everything. Protocols, training materials, even a playbook for rolling out updates without shortcuts. And I shared it across departments, with legal, with operations, with marketing. If anyone tried to sideline the patent again, there'd be a record so airtight they couldn't pretend it didn't matter. I also made a point of mentoring the junior engineers who looked up to me. I saw in them the same spark I had, hungry to innovate but cautious of the corporate grind. I told them, your ideas matter. Fight for them. And when people tell you, we're moving in a new direction, ask them exactly which direction that is. It felt good to pass on what I'd learned the hard way. By the time the revamped therapy hit full rollout, the panic that had gripped the company months earlier felt like a distant memory. Leaders gave speeches about commitment to excellence and patient-first innovation. I smiled politely, but I knew the truth. It was our team, our method, our patent that saved the day. And as I watched the first new batch of data come in, patients improving, side effects vanishing, doctors praising the turnaround, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not because I'd won a battle, but because I'd reminded everyone what success really looks like. I woke up that morning to an inbox filled with messages. Thank yous from doctors, updates from our quality team, even a video clip from a nurse in the field celebrating a patient's full recovery. It was like watching ripples spread across a pond. One small change sending waves of relief, confidence, and hope all the way to the families counting on us. In that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about a patent or a project. It was about trust. The trust patients place in us, the trust colleagues place in each other, and the trust we have in our own ability to make things better. When I think back to that new manager's first presentation, all those buzzwords about data-forward models and innovative pivots, it almost feels like a dream. Because innovation isn't a slogan. It isn't a flashy deck with slick graphs. It's the quiet conviction that the details matter. It's the late-night rechecks, the extra questions asked in a hallway, the willingness to say, wait, are we sure this is safe? It's fighting for the tiny improvements that don't look like much on paper, but mean the world to someone lying in a hospital bed. And if there's one big takeaway from this whole roller coaster, it's this. When you build something worth building, you have to guard it fiercely. Don't let shortcuts, egos, or power plays strip away the heart of your work. Document it, advocate for it, teach it, because your ideas aren't just lines in a document, they're lifelines for real people. Real mothers and fathers, siblings, spouses, friends who put their hopes into your hands. That's a responsibility that goes beyond any org chart or quarterly goal. Of course, it wasn't all triumph. There were late nights when the weight of it all felt too much. Moments when I wondered if pushing back was worth the risk to my career. There were colleagues who whispered that I should let it go, that the corporate machine would chew me up if I didn't play along. But every time I saw a chart spike in the right direction or read a message from a patient's family, I remembered why I started this in the first place. And I thought about all of you out there. Maybe you're working on a side project, an invention, a piece of software, a nonprofit idea. Maybe you've met resistance or felt invisible. Take a moment right now to own your work. Protect it, share it, let it shine. Because here's the truth. Real change rarely happens in boardrooms. Real change happens in labs, in workshops, in code repositories, and in the quiet conversations where people figure out how to make things safer, faster, kinder. Change happens when someone refuses to let a good idea slide. And change happens when we remember that every stopwatch tick and every dollar spent ultimately circles back to someone's health, someone's well-being, someone's life. So if you're watching this and you've got an idea you believe in, hold on to it, document it, Get the patent, the proof, the pilot data, whatever you need to show that it works. Then, when the shortcuts come knocking, stand your ground. It's not about defying authority. It's about honoring the people you're trying to help. I also want to hear from you. Have you ever stood up for a project or idea that others dismissed? Did you face pushback? How did you keep the flame alive? Share your experiences in the comments. Your story could be the encouragement someone else needs to keep going. If you found value in this journey, from that first overlooked patent to the triumphant revival, hit that like button. And if you want more behind-the-scenes tales of innovation, adversity, and real-world impact, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Remember, success isn't a title or a press release. Success is knowing that your work makes a difference. It's the moment you see someone's life improve because you refused to take no for an answer. Live boldly, build fiercely, and never underestimate the power of one small idea to change the world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Live your best life and always fight for what matters.